On February 24, 2024, a single-engine, six-seat aircraft was destroyed after departing James A. Rhodes Airport in Jackson, Ohio. 3 people were on board, heading to Florida to pick up a vehicle. They never made it. The 45-year-old pilot was accompanied by his 78-year-old father. In his obituary following the crash, it stated that his father, who was sitting next to him, had preceded the pilot into death. There's no easy way to write that. Also in the airplane was a 44-year-old father of 5 children. His obituary stated that he died during one last act of kindness. Likely that was fetching the truck from Florida to drive it back with a 78-year-old co-occupant. The pilot was not instrument rated, meaning that he had not passed an FAA check ride, validating that he could safely operate an aircraft without a visual horizon to orient himself and to maintain control of the aircraft. That morning, he reviewed the weather using ForeFlight. Forecasts warn of snow, low ceilings, and limited visibility. An active AirMIT for IFR conditions was in place. The weather at departure was reported as overcast at 1,200 feet, 1 1/3 miles visibility, and light snow with gusting winds. Still, the pilot chose to launch under VFR. They departed runway 1 around 11:36 a.m. A local flight instructor watched the takeoff. He noted heavy snow, winds gusting across the field, and visibility of barely half a mile. As the aircraft lifted off, it disappeared almost immediately into the clouds. He turned to his wife and said, "This won't end well." A second witness saw the plane turn left, flying low over his house. He said that if not for the snow, he could have read the tail number. This indicates that the pilot was involved in something called scud running, flying at a low altitude to avoid entering the clouds. Scud running has a history of preceding fatal crashes. So does a visual flight rules only pilot entering into instrument conditions. So does operating an aircraft not equipped with de-ice equipment into a snowstorm. The multiplicity of the risk factors pointed to an unremarkable but tragic outcome. The conditions weren't the only problem. A post-crash autopsy of the pilot revealed diphenhydramine, a sedating antihistamine found in common sleep aids. Its effect? Drowsiness, slowed cognition, vestibular disruption, all of which obviously affect a pilot's ability to make quick decisions under trying circumstances. The FAA recommends pilots avoid flying within 60 hours of using an antihistamine. There's no way to tell whether the pilot took it the night before or days earlier, but its presence raises questions about fatigue and decision-making under stress. There was also more in the medical report. Dead pilots are afforded no privacy. Also found in his liver was tadalafil, a wonder drug of multiple uses. Predominantly prescribed to treat erectile dysfunction and as an enhancement aid, it is also used to treat enlarged prostate and, pedestrianly, pulmonary hypertension. Also on the toxicology report was ranitidine, a stomach acid suppression drug that was banned by the FDA in 2020 due to concerns over increased cancer risks. Regardless, the airplane, at low altitude and low visibility, attempted to circle back towards the airport, then vanished from sight. Not long after this, the sound of an impact was heard. Long before this, another tragedy unfolded, one similarly the result of bad weather and preventable decisions claimed 4 lives, 3 of them rising stars of American rock and roll. February 3, 1959, a cold, clear night in Iowa, would become known as the day the music died. A small aircraft, a 1947 Beechcraft Bonanza, crashed into a snow-covered cornfield outside of Mason City. On board were 3 famous rock and rollers, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson. All 3 were killed, along with the 21-year-old pilot, Roger Peterson. They had been performing on the infamous Winter Dance Party Tour, 24 cities and 24 nights, zigzagging across the Midwest in the dead of winter. Poorly planned and brutally paced, the tour required long daily bus rides over icy 2-lane highways. There were no off days, no road crew. The musicians loaded and unloaded their own gear. The conditions were punishing. The tour bus broke down repeatedly. The drummer was hospitalized with frostbite. Several performers were sick with the flu. One unscheduled stop was added in Clear Lake, Iowa at the Surf Ballroom. After the show, Buddy Holly, exhausted and fed up with the bus, chartered a small plane to reach the next tour stop in Moorhead, Minnesota. The Bonanza seated 3 passengers. J.P. Richardson, sick with the flu, asked Waylon Jennings for his seat. Jennings agreed. Ritchie Valens and guitarist Tommy Alsop flipped a coin for the final spot. Valens won. He would later say, "That's the first thing I've ever won." The Bonanza, registration November 3794 November, was a V-tail model, sleek and fast, and popular at the time. Years later, it would earn a deadly reputation among private pilots, often dubbed the Doctor Killer due to its unforgiving flight characteristics and accident history. The charter cost $36 per seat, about $390 in today's dollars. The pilot, Roger Peterson, was young and eager. He started flying at 17, and on the night of the accident, at just 21, he had accumulated over 700 flight hours, including 128 in the Bonanza, and with 52 hours flying solely by reference to instruments. Those 52 hours occurred with an instructor safety pilot on board as part of training for an instrument rating. Peterson satisfactorily completed the training, but failed the check ride the year before, and as such was not legal to fly without a visible horizon. The night of the crash, he checked the weather repeatedly, first around 7 p.m. At 11:55 p.m., he and the owner personally visited the air traffic communication station for a final update. At that time, light snow was falling with a ceiling of 5,000 feet. The current weather along the route had isolated pockets of snow, but was otherwise non-threatening. At the time the passengers arrived at 12:40 a.m., the weather at the departure airport had worsened. 3,000-foot ceilings, 6 miles visibility in snow, and gusting southerly winds to 30 knots. What Peterson wasn't told was that flash advisories had been issued warning of rapidly developing snowstorms along his route. The flight would almost certainly enter instrument conditions. The weather briefers had limited themselves to the current conditions along the route, curiously leaving out the poor forecasts. What Peterson had gotten was a nowcast of the weather. This may have led him to believe that the local snow flurry was isolated, something requiring only a few minutes of flying to exit. Added to this, Peterson had likely been awake for at least 17 hours at the time of departure, meaning that he was almost certainly fatigued. To go along with the weather, the Bonanza had one more trap. It was fitted with a Sperry F3 attitude indicator, an obsolete reverse-sensing gyro. Unlike conventional indicators in which the airplane is depicted as above the horizon for a climb and below it for a descent, the F3 was designed so that the aircraft, in essence, rotated around the gyroscope, which meant that in a climb it would show the horizon above the aircraft, a reversal of every standard instrument training scenario Peterson had ever seen, and opposite to the appearance of the visible horizon when flying in VFR conditions. For any pilot, this would be counterintuitive. For a low-experienced pilot under pressure, in snow, at night, with no visible horizon, it could be fatal. And it was. At approximately 12:55 a.m., just minutes after takeoff, the aircraft impacted the ground in a right bank nose-down attitude. According to the analog instruments, which captured an epitaph of the final moments of the crash, the aircraft had been descending at 3,000 feet per minute at an airspeed of 170 knots. The RPM gauge depicted 2,200 RPM during impact, a relatively normal indication for flight. The Sperry attitude indicator depicted a 90-degree right bank, nose down, or in this case up, which for the F3 meant down, attitude for the aircraft. If that last sentence is confusing, you have some idea what it was like for pilot Peterson to read that gauge. All occupants except the pilot were thrown from the wreckage. Peterson died at the controls, manning his station, doing what he loved to do. There was no post-crash fire. Temperatures were so cold that the spilled fuel did not ignite. Investigators later noted that the magneto switches were in the off positions, suggesting Peterson may have tried to shut the engine down before impact, perhaps hoping to reduce the chance of a fire. The wreckage was entangled in a barbed wire fence. The Civil Aeronautics Board, precursor to the FAA, concluded, "This accident, like so many before it, was caused by the pilot's decision to undertake a flight in which the likelihood of encountering instrument conditions existed without the necessary familiarization with the instruments in the aircraft and without being properly certificated to fly solely by instruments." In other words, a relatively inexperienced pilot flying into worsening weather without instrument certification over snow-drenched ground crashed with passengers on board, all except one thrown clear of the aircraft due to the violence of the impact forces. The rest of the tour went on, tickets had been sold, promoters expected a show. So the remaining musicians, still grieving, played on in a flurry of bourbon and heartbreak. It's worth remembering, in 1959 aviation was cheap, and so often were the lives involved. Today, safety comes at a higher price. We spend more to design instruments to work with human reflexes, not against them. And we learn, again and again, from the mistakes of the past. In aviation, tragic patterns repeat. A pilot flying into IMC without qualification. misleading or incomplete weather information, an unfamiliar instrument panel, a decision made under fatigue, pressure, or false confidence. When lives are lost in the skies, the tragedy is immediate. But what if death isn't the end? In my companion video, I explore real accounts of people who died, clinically, and came back with stories that defy explanation. Watch it next by clicking the next video thumbnail at the end, or scan the QR code, or click the link above. The link is in the description as well. Exactly 65 years and 3 weeks after the music died, 3 more men were killed in the snow in an aircraft flown by a non-instrument rated pilot. Every generation either learns from the sins of the previous, or they succumb to the same mortal errors. As it was, roughly 5 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft slammed into the ground. The impact was linear, the wreckage was upright. It looked like a controlled descent into terrain. The post-impact fire destroyed most of the aircraft. No pre-crash mechanical anomalies were found. Flight controls showed continuity. The engine had power at impact. There was no ADSB data, no flight recorder, no cockpit voice, no second chances. The manual flap lever was fully extended, indicating a possible attempt by the overwhelmed pilot to perform an emergency landing. The seats were torn from their mounts. The panel was fragmented and burned. 2 occupants were thrown from the aircraft. Another remained in the aircraft, cremated by the blazing inferno. The weather at takeoff, 1,200-foot ceiling, visibility 1 3/4 mile, snow falling, gusts to 17 knots. It was instrument meteorological conditions through and through, conditions that the pilot wasn't qualified for. His instructor said that he had about 20 hours under the hood practicing simulated instrument flying, but he had no instrument rating, no legal authority to fly in weather like this. Controlled flight into terrain, or CFIT, is often the result of spatial disorientation. Without a horizon, the inner ear becomes unreliable. The body lies. Compounding this, possibly, were the vestibular effects of the antihistamine in his system. In the clouds, only the instruments tell the truth, but you have to be trained to trust them. The cause of the accident was clear. The non-instrument rated pilot's decision to depart under visual flight rules into instrument meteorological conditions. It was not just an error, it was a violation of the most basic principle in aviation: know your limits. 3 people lost their lives, not because the airplane failed, not because of a storm no one saw coming, but because of a choice: to fly into weather without the tools, training, or qualifications to handle it. It's an unfortunate and familiar story. Every year, general aviation pilots attempt a VFR flight into IMC. Many result in crashes. 2/3 of those crashes are fatal. The cause of the crash is so ubiquitous that the NTSB added an unusual concluding statement. In it, they referenced NTSB Safety Alert SA020 titled "Reduced Visual References Require Vigilance." In the introduction, they state, "Sadly, the circumstances of each new accident are often remarkably similar to those of previous accidents. This suggests that some pilots are not taking advantage of the lessons learned from such tragedies that could help them to avoid making the same mistakes." This wasn't a crash caused by faulty equipment or bad luck. It was caused by a human decision, a preventable one. From SA020, refuse to allow external pressures to influence you to attempt or continue a flight in conditions in which you are not comfortable. Be honest about your skill limitations. Even visual weather at night can be deceptively dangerous. Let it serve as a warning. Get the training, know your ratings, respect the weather. No one prefers tragedy over a canceled flight. As always, God bless them.